Your hands are soft, that's the problem, not your resume, not your bank account, not your work ethic, your hands. Look at them right now, no calluses, no thickened skin, no proof that anything ever pushed back against you hard enough to leave a mark. And somewhere, without you noticing, that became the entire story of your money. Here's what nobody explains about wealth. It doesn't reward effort. It rewards damage. Controlled, repeated, survived damage. The kind that leaves a callus. Think about what a callus actually is. Skin gets rubbed raw over and over in the same exact spot, and instead of staying fragile, it hardens. It becomes armor built precisely where the friction happened. Nowhere else. Not on the parts of your hand that never touched anything rough. Only there. Only where the pain repeated itself long enough for the body to respond. Money works the same way. It doesn't build armor on the parts of your life that stayed comfortable. It builds it only where you let something grind against you long enough to change your shape. And most people never let that happen. Not because they're weak, because the alternative feels so much safer. This is where most people quietly sabotage themselves, not through laziness, through the opposite, through motion. Busy, constant, exhausting motion aimed at the wrong target entirely. You wake up and you optimize your morning routine. You color code a spreadsheet nobody will ever check. You watch one more video about productivity hacks instead of doing the thing the hacks are supposed to help you do. You clean an inbox to zero. Every one of these things feels like progress because your brain rewards you the second the task disappears. That's the trap, and it's a quiet one. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between I solved something that mattered and I solved something easy. It just wants the discomfort of an open task to end, so it keeps steering you toward whatever ends the fastest, never toward whatever pays the most. And here's the mechanism hiding underneath all of it, the one that explains why this keeps happening even to people who genuinely want more. The market you're trying to earn from is not measuring your effort. It never was. It's measuring what you were willing to touch that other people weren't. Every dollar sitting inside someone else's business right now is sitting there because a problem was too rough for most people to approach, too confusing to untangle, too slow to pay off, too socially uncomfortable to attempt in public where people might watch you struggle, too likely to fail visibly with your name attached to it. The friction is the price tag on the reward. And somebody somewhere decided the price was worth paying and walked away with what everyone else left on the table because it felt like too much. You've been solving the problems with no friction attached, which means, without realizing it, you've been standing in line for a reward that was never going to arrive at that counter. Now pay close attention here, because this is where it becomes dangerous if you get it wrong. This isn't a call to suffer for no reason. Random pain doesn't build calluses either. Rub your hand against the wrong surface in a new spot every day and you don't get armor, you get a series of small wounds that never heal in anything useful. The friction has to be specific. It has to repeat. It has to land in the exact spot the market is actually willing to pay for. So the real question was never, how do I work harder? It's narrower and much more uncomfortable. Where precisely am I still soft? For most people chasing their first million, it's one of three spots, and if you're honest with yourself for the next 30 seconds, you'll already know which one is yours. The first is the conversation you keep avoiding, the pitch you haven't made, the price you're afraid to ask for out loud, the client you haven't followed up with because some part of you would rather live with uncertainty than risk a clear no. Every day that conversation doesn't happen, the skin there stays exactly as thin as it was the day before. Nothing toughens, nothing changes. The friction that would have built something simply never made contact. The second is the skill that takes months, not minutes, to develop. Writing that actually moves people instead of just filling space. Building something technical instead of assembling it from a template someone else already sold 1,000 times. Understanding a market well enough to predict where it's heading, not just describe where it's been. These require real, repeated contact with resistance, and almost everyone quits before the callus forms because the early stage of skill building feels indistinguishable from failure. It looks the same from the outside. It feels the same from the inside. The only difference is whether you stay in contact with it long enough for your hands to change. The third, and this is the one people protect the most fiercely, often without admitting it, is exposure. Publishing the thing before it's polished, making the offer before you feel remotely ready, standing in front of judgment while you're still clumsy, still figuring it out in real time, still capable of getting it visibly wrong. That friction isn't physical, it's social, and it burns worse than the other two combined, which is exactly why it pays the most. The market has always overpaid for the people willing to look foolish in public before they knew what they were doing. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you more than any of this has so far. Every day you avoid that specific friction, the gap between you and the outcome you want doesn't stay the same size. It widens. Somewhere right now, someone with less talent than you, fewer resources than you, a worse starting position than you is standing directly inside that discomfort. Badly, clumsily, embarrassingly even. And their hands are changing shape while yours stay exactly as they were yesterday, and the day before that, and the month before that. This isn't motivational language, it's just the mechanical reality of what's happening while most people wait to feel ready. And here's what almost nobody tells you about calluses once they actually start forming. They don't stay isolated. A callus on one finger changes how you grip everything else. The resistance that used to stop you at the first knuckle now barely registers by the second. This is how leverage actually compounds, not through some abstract financial formula, but through tissue. The client conversation that terrified you in January becomes routine by March. The skill that took you 4 brutal hours to practice now takes 40 minutes. What felt like the edge of your ability becomes the floor you stand on. People call this getting good, as if it happens on its own. It doesn't. It happens because the same spot got rubbed raw enough times that it stopped being the softest part of you. So what do you actually do with all of this? You stop measuring your day by how much got crossed off a list. That number was never the point, and chasing it has cost you more time than you've probably calculated. You start measuring your day by one thing only. Did you make contact with the rough spot? The one conversation you'd normally slide past? The one skill rep that felt too slow to bother with? The one moment of exposure that made your stomach tighten before you even opened the laptop? One deliberate contact with resistance every single day in the same location, aimed at the same spot. That's the entire mechanism, not intensity for its own sake. Precision repeated without exception. And something happens the moment you commit to that, something almost nobody warns you about before you experience it yourself. The friction stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like information. Every wince tells you exactly where the callus is forming. Every uncomfortable call, every clumsy thing you publish, every number you ask for that makes your stomach drop. None of that is resistance stopping you. That's resistance building the exact tissue the market is eventually going to pay for, whether it feels like it in the moment or not. This is why the first real move toward money never looks like a breakthrough. It looks like irritation, like low-grade, unglamorous friction. Like the version of you today rubbing uncomfortably against the version of you that hasn't been built yet, day after day, with nothing dramatic to show for it at first. And it stays uncomfortable right up until the moment it simply doesn't anymore. Right up until that one spot, the one you kept returning to when everything in you wanted to avoid it, stops hurting and starts holding weight nobody else in the room is able to hold. That's the moment the entire equation flips on its axis. Once the callus is there, the same friction that used to wound you barely registers at all. What breaks other people, you shrug off without thinking twice. What makes other people flinch and retreat, you walk straight into, not because you're braver, but because your hands remember. That's not confidence. That's tissue. Built the only way it has ever been built by anyone in any field at any point in history. So before you open one more tab, before you sort one more folder, before you optimize one more system that was never going to move the number that actually matters to your life, stop and ask yourself honestly where you're still soft. Find that one spot, go back to it tomorrow, and the day after that, not because it feels good, it won't for a while, but because it is, without exception, the only place your first million was ever going to come from.